More twists in the search for Nancy Guthrie. A new note arrived in a media outlet's inbox in similar fashion to the alleged ransom note sent last week. Was it sent by the person that we see in this chilling video? No ransom demand this time, just someone claiming they know what happened to Nancy Guthrie and they want money for what they know. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Well, we are now on day 11 of the search for Nancy Guthrie. So let's talk about where investigators may now be looking. TMZ is reporting that they received a new note on Wednesday from someone claiming to have information in connection to the case of Nancy Guthrie. Now, this is a brand new billboard right here put out by the FBI. Now, before we get into this new note that allegedly says something about Nancy Guthrie that could be very important to this investigation and whether any part of it seems legit, I do want to update you with what the FBI just said they are doing today. The FBI put out a statement saying that they are working an extensive search, their words, along multiple roadways in the area of Catalina Foothills, which is the area of Tucson, north of downtown, where Nancy Guthrie's house is located. So we know that the FBI and other members of law enforcement, they have just been continuously going back and forth between Nancy Guthrie's home and her daughter Annie's home, searching for any sort of clues that could lead them to Nancy Guthrie. And remember, law enforcement dropped these creepy but clear images of the person they believe tampered with Nancy's security camera moments before she disappeared back on February 1st. Then you have that major development that happened overnight. Authorities detaining a man who then hours later was released. We'll get into those updates here in just a moment and whether it could still factor in to this case. But let's get back to this new note that TMZ says that it received around 5 o'clock Pacific time this morning here on Wednesday. Now, remember, TMZ was one of the news organizations who received an alleged ransom note last week. One of the other organizations to receive it was K-Gun Television, which is a local station in Tucson, as well as another local TV station in Tucson said that they got one of those initial ransom notes. But K-Gun said that the alleged demand was for $6 million to be sent in Bitcoin on Monday. That deadline passed, and it doesn't appear that the ransom was paid. This new note, it's a bit different from the alleged ransom note that Harvey Levin from TMZ has been talking about. He says the first note claimed that if the ransom was paid, that Nancy Guthrie would be returned within 12 hours, which definitely casts a wide net when you think of the different states that you can get to from Tucson within a 12-hour drive of going the speed limit. TMZ has said that that initial ransom note and even the follow-up from it, there was no proof of life, and there was really no communication that we knew about. And the FBI has said they don't know of communication between the Guthrie family and Nancy Guthrie's alleged kidnappers. But the note did allegedly say that Nancy was safe, but she was scared, and she understood the situation that she was in. Now, the new note today does not appear to be from a kidnapper. It appears to be from someone claiming they know the kidnapper and they know where Nancy Guthrie is. The note reportedly says that for $1 Bitcoin, they will give the name of the suspect in the case. TMZ says that the account listed in this note is a real Bitcoin account, but it's different from the Bitcoin account that was in the first alleged ransom note provided. Now, at the time of this recording, a Bitcoin, it's worth about $66,200. Bitcoin's very volatile, though, and all of that could change. TMZ says that they have provided this new note to the FBI. You think of the cost of a Bitcoin, $66,000. The FBI is offering a reward of $50,000 for information that could lead to Nancy Guthrie or her kidnappers. Now, one of the big questions in this case, as we have been following all the different developments that have come in, but related to the ransom notes, the big question has been, are these real? Were they actually sent by the person who took Nancy Guthrie? Did the person who authorities show masked and armed on her front doorsteps on February 1st, is that the person who sent the alleged ransom notes to the media outlets? A very important tool that we use here at Law&Crime, Truth Finder, helps us search public records for our stories, including this one. Truth Finder saves us research time so we can focus on reporting crime, not paperwork. Now, you can use Truth Finder as well. You type in a name, you can find addresses, criminal history, and more. It is our go-to tool for checks, and it's one of the largest search services in the United States. With the subscription, you get unlimited confidential searches to check on new neighbors. You can vet people you meet online or find someone that you want to reconnect with. You can even look up registered sex offenders nearby or do a background search on yourself. Stay informed, stay safe. Check public records with Truthfinder now at truthfinder.com/OTC.
This is very valuable to us, and we will pay.
That was today's show host Savannah Guthrie in the days leading up to that Monday deadline. But then the deadline came and the deadline went, and there has appeared to be no activity in the Bitcoin account other than last night when K-Gun reported $300 being put in. It's unclear what was behind that move, who put the money in, and the reason behind it. Now, Savannah Guthrie then posted this video, which was a very distinct change in her tone and her message.
As we enter into another week of this nightmare, I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for all of the prayers and the love that we have felt, my sister and brother and I, and that our mom has felt. Because we believe that somehow, some way, she is feeling these prayers and that God is lifting her even in this moment and in this darkest place. We believe our mom is still out there. We need your help. Law enforcement is working tirelessly around the clock trying to bring her home, trying to find her. She was taken and we don't know where. And we need your help. So I'm coming on just to ask you, not just for your prayers, but no matter where you are, even if you're far from Tucson, if you see anything, if you hear anything, if there's anything at all that seems strange to you, that you report to law enforcement. We are at an hour of desperation, and we need your help.
The FBI will not say whether they believe the ransom notes are legit, but they have said they are taking these notes seriously. TMZ is reporting that the FBI is operating on the belief that the ransom notes were sent by Nancy's kidnapper or kidnappers. Now, once again, here are the pictures that the FBI put out on Tuesday of the person who was on the front steps of Nancy's house the morning that she vanished. And we're showing you these again because it just seems like every time you look at them, you can pick up something new. And it could just be that little piece of information that could crack the case open. So as you get a good look at the video and the pictures that were put out, you see the person in a mask. The sheriff is describing this person as an armed individual who appears to have tampered with the camera at Nancy Guthrie's front door the morning that she disappeared. Remember, that camera was missing and law enforcement said they did not know where the specific device went. Now, the person on the front steps, they have a backpack, they have gloves. It's important to note that the backpack seems full already. The sheriff says that they were only recently able to get these videos and images. Of course, there are a lot of questions about how they were able to go in, which the FBI says was totally legal, going in through whether it's like the figurative back door of Nest into a server. And they were able to pull these images out from what they described as residual data that in methods that they can use to find images and files that were lost, corrupt, or inaccessible because of a variety of factors. They say one of those factors could be that the device was removed. Now, the sheriff released the images in a tweet on Tuesday, and at that point, it was 10 days since Nancy disappeared. The sheriff's department has not elaborated further on any other details about this person, like where they think this person is or what happened. And there is that question of what more video or images do law enforcement now have? Now, we also don't know if this person was the only person who was captured on surveillance video, just that these are the only images that at this point have been released to the public, not just by the local sheriff's department, but also by the FBI. Now, you can see as you take a look at these videos. Let's look at them again. This person approaches the camera, and I found this really interesting. They look like they're about to knock on the door, and then it seems like they realize that the camera is there, and it's like they're thinking about what are they supposed to do? So they go back and they grab flowers or some sort of brush and they walk back to the camera and they lean in with this brush in their hand to try and cover their face, which was already captured on the camera. And then when you look at the second video, it picks up with the camera covered by those flowers or brush. And then you see the person's knuckles, and then the eyes of the suspect shine right into the camera. And there appears to be some sort of bright light coming from the person's mouth. Is that a flashlight? Is it just some sort of reflection? And when you look at their mask, you can see what appears to be facial hair around the mouth, and the eye holes are big enough where we get a pretty good look at this person's eyes and even their eyebrows. That was a major development yesterday, but maybe not the biggest in this case, because if you were up in the middle of the night between Tuesday and Wednesday, it did appear that law enforcement had made a major move. This is a picture of the scene of a traffic stop that happened about an hour south of Nancy Guthrie's house.
Terrifying. Something I didn't do for something. I was being like, I felt like I was being kidnapped, bro, because they didn't tell me anything at the beginning.
And that's a man named Carlos Palazuelos. He was speaking with reporters after he says he was the man reportedly detained after a traffic stop in connection to the search for Nancy Guthrie. That video's per CBS News. Now, Carlos lives in Rio Rico, Arizona. It's about an hour south of where Nancy Guthrie lives in Tucson. It is close to the border with Mexico. Now, Carlos claims he's innocent. He says he is not the person that you see in those surveillance images, and he wants his name and his family's name cleared. He says that law enforcement detained him as he was out driving for DoorDash last night, and it doesn't appear that law enforcement, though, were just interested in him, but they were also interested in his house and what might be in his house. The Pima County Sheriff says that they executed a court-approved search of Carlos's house. His mother-in-law says that when law enforcement went into their house, they took electronics. It's unclear if this search found anything of value. Carlos says that he has no clue why authorities were looking at him. He says he's a delivery driver during the day in Tucson. So he suggested this.
Yeah, I work in Tucson.
What do you do?
GLS, deliver packages.
Okay, do you think you might have delivered a package to Nancy Guthrie's house?
I don't know. Might have been a possibility. I don't know.
Now, it's unclear what kind of evidence law enforcement had that made them believe that this man or someone associated with him could be involved. It's unclear if he has officially been cleared at this hour. Carlos's mother-in-law told media outlets that law enforcement actually kicked down their door and they showed her pictures of the masked man outside of Nancy Guthrie's house, and they were asking her if that was her son-in-law, and she said no. She believes that he is innocent. Now, we know that investigators have been trying to figure out who had access to Nancy's home. She lived alone, but Fox News is reporting that she did have some hired employees, people that would come clean her pool or do some gardening and landscaping, and those people have been asked to give DNA samples. We also know that blood samples from outside of Nancy's home were sent to a lab to be tested. This is that video from News Nation. The samples came back as Nancy's. But it's important to note it's unclear if the masked person left anything behind, but law enforcement haven't confirmed what evidence was taken from inside Nancy's house. Investigators continue to comb through Nancy's neighborhood. As we just talked about at the top, that's what they're doing today. They've also been combing through the neighborhood of her daughters, Annie. Annie lives about 10 minutes away from Nancy, and before Carlos was detained, we saw law enforcement working their way through Annie's neighborhood. Over the weekend, law enforcement did a consensual search of Annie's home. So different from the kind of search at Carlos's house last night, where you needed a judge to give you permission to go inside. This search of Annie's home was done with the permission of the family. And Annie's house was where Nancy was before she returned to her home just hours before she was allegedly taken back on February 1st. Now, as the search for Nancy Guthrie continues, the scope of this case goes far beyond Tucson. It goes far beyond Arizona, potentially, because billboards are now up in several cities in the Southwest, as far away as El Paso, even as far west as Los Angeles. And again, the FBI is offering that $50,000 reward for information leading to Nancy or her captors. Savannah Guthrie continues to hold out hope that her mom will be brought home safely, that this nightmare can have somewhat of a happy ending. Savannah posted the images of the person of interest on her mom's doorstep and wrote, quote, "Someone out there recognizes this person. We believe she is still out there. Bring her home." And she also wrote, quote, "We believe she is still alive." If you have any information on where Nancy Guthrie may be, contact the Pima County Sheriff at 520-351-4900. You can also contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or go to tips.fbi.gov. Join us now to talk about this case is retired detective commander with the Chicago Police Department, Will Sevilar. We got a lot to get to. Thanks for being with us. This new Bitcoin note that TMZ says that they received. It's a different account than the ransom note. And for 1 Bitcoin, they say that they will tell you where, Nancy Guthrie is and who took her. What's your gut tell you when you first just kind of hear those details that TMZ says it's turned over to the FBI?
Chris, anytime you have a high profile case like this, where it's all over the national news, it's all over world news, you're going to get people coming out of the woodwork trying to take advantage of this. 1 Bitcoin, I'll tell you where she is. I mean, I would have to question the legitimacy of that.
Yeah, and like $66,000, a lot of money to a lot of people. But, still, it's. I mean, why not just go to the FBI? I know they're offering $50,000, but it just seems like. But at the same time, though, I mean, if you're the FBI, like, how do you vet this to actually? It's easy for me on the outside to be like, it sounds like BS, but if you're the FBI and you're following every lead possible, like, how do you handle this as well as anything else that comes in of someone claiming to have information or claiming to even have Nancy Guthrie?
Now, I know that there's ways to track these Bitcoin wallets. When they open these wallets, there's ways to track them, but not everywhere. I think there's some countries that don't track these things. And I'm very happy that the FBI is involved with this because they know how to get all of that information. Now, local law enforcement might have a problem with that. I guarantee you I wouldn't know how to do it. But the FBI is they're the forefront in this type of stuff. And I imagine if they can trace that wallet, they can see if there's any activity into that wallet and see where it's coming from. But again, I think you're going to see a lot more than that. You're going to see a lot more people coming out with tips and their take on what's going on.
Yeah. And it's so disturbing and sad, but unfortunately in these situations, you come to expect it. This scene last night near the US Mexico border, it's interesting where, we had, was covering it when a man was detained. I fell asleep before knowing who he was. And I wake up to seeing him like Entertainment Tonight's on his front steps. And he's doing these interviews saying he has no idea who even Savannah Guthrie is or Nancy Guthrie and what the case was going on. And he was probably detained for like 5 hours. I would say the time from the traffic stop to then when he's back at his house. He says he's innocent, and that very well may be the case. But when someone is detained and then released, like, what can you take away from that?
Well, it sounds to me like they kept him detained while they executed the search warrant. I'm sure they didn't want him around when they did the warrant. So the detention was probably to keep him away from the house and the search warrant. The fact that he's released so quickly, I don't know if they think he did it, but I think what's very important here is, again, when we look back into this thing, if you're doing this investigation, you're saying, I got to look at delivery drivers. I got to look at maintenance workers. I got to look at landscapers. I got to look at anybody that has access to this property. Now, just being a delivery driver in the area is not going to be enough to get probable cause for a search warrant. So the fact that he's detained and released so quickly, I think possibly they're more concerned with his associates than him.
That was my next question, because there was a search of Annie Guthrie's home over the weekend, and that was a consensual search. And I saw a lot of people saying, like, why does it matter that everybody just keeps saying it's a consensual search? In this case, you had to go to a judge, and a judge would have to look and sign off and say that you have permission to go into Carlos's house and take his electronic devices and do all of that. Typically, when you how often is a search warrant denied? Like, what do you need to bring to the table that a judge can sign off, especially in a case as high profile as this, and let you just go explore and see if you can find what you're looking for?
Well, you have to convince a judge that there's probable cause. What does probable cause mean? It means that a reasonable person would believe that making entry, following the Fourth Amendment search and seizure rules, making entry to this house, a reasonable person would believe that there would be evidence in there from this crime. So, and again, you have to be specific on what you're looking for. You have to be specific on what crime you're investigating. And I'm curious as to who wrote the warrant. Is it a federal warrant or is it a local law enforcement warrant? So you have to convince a judge, and reasonableness is always the standard, that if we make entry into this person's house, into their home, that there's something in this house that we're going to recover that will aid in this investigation. And however they did that, it's in the affidavit.
So if he was the one who suggested, he said, I'm a delivery driver in Tucson. Maybe I delivered a package to her home. I'm paraphrasing, something along those lines. If you're a federal agent or a local sheriff's deputy and you go to a judge and you say, we're just trying to look at people who were at and had access to Nancy Guthrie's home. This guy was a delivery driver. Can I go into his house? I would need more than that to get the AOK to execute a search warrant.
Yep, that on itself would not be enough, because there's a million. I don't know a million, but there's several. There's UPS, there's FedEx, there's DHL, there's all these delivery services. And here's the thing: on a lot of these, like Amazon, they'll contract people out who aren't necessarily driving Amazon trucks. They're driving their own cars, dropping stuff off. So it's an awful lot to vet. And you're not just going to take. First of all, you're not going to get any kind of PC on just an anonymous tip. Judge is not going to sign off on that. And the fact that he's just a delivery driver in the area is not going to be enough. So there's more there. There's more there for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you have this moment, and I think sometimes when you follow stories in the news, it's like, okay, person's detained, and then the natural progression is they get arrested. Then the natural progression after that is they're charged, and we get the mugshot, and like that's how the story goes in a lot of cases. But in this one, it's he was detained and he was released. How often when someone is detained in a situation like this, it's just, hey, we got the wrong guy, we went into the house, and there's literally nothing there?
Well, it happens, but it doesn't happen that frequently. When you talk about going to the house, there's nothing there, but they did take stuff out of the house. They took all his electronics. And again, like I said earlier, it may not be him. It may be people that he made a phone call to. And maybe they have some kind of electronic footprint or fingerprint, rather, that says he was in the area 2 days prior, or he's been in the area multiple times. And maybe he did make a delivery, or maybe he didn't, but he was still in the area. And then he made a phone call to whoever, or he sent an email to whoever. So I think that they're interested in his associates as much as they are him.
And he seemed, authentic to an extent, like on his front steps, like trying to clear his name, and like played very much. And I don't know if it's playing, like maybe he was just saying like, I have no idea why I'm in this situation. Like when you're on the other end of the table, if you're the FBI speaking to him yet, like if you're the FBI that's, interviewing him, like how many cards are you laying out so he knows actually why you are speaking to him? Where are you throwing out names of people you associate with, knowing that he could do what he did last night? And then if they had told him everything, he's stalking to Entertainment Tonight and saying, this is why they interviewed me. It's my friend or associate or something like that.
You leave a copy of the search warrant at the house, showing the judge signed off on it. Your affidavit's not with that. It's just a copy of the search warrant. And you don't necessarily tell him anything. You have to tell him why you're detaining him. You're being detained in relation to the investigation of this kidnapping. You don't have to tell them anything else. And again, if you stop somebody, if you restrict somebody's movement and you move them from one place to another, that's an arrest. You can they can try to call it whatever they want, but when you restrict somebody's movement and then take them from one place to another without their consent, that's an arrest. Doesn't mean you can't release them without charges, which is what they did, but you're just not detained, you're under arrest.
And when you look at the images that were released by the FBI yesterday, and I know we talked before where, like, is this a person who is a sophisticated criminal, or is this just some guy in the moment of opportunity? When you watch the body language of how he approaches the door, what stood out to you?
The fact that it almost looked like he was surprised that there was a camera there. And obviously there was no sense of urgency in his movement. He kind of meanders around, he walks slow. He picks up some weeds. Why don't you just knock it off the wall? Or why don't you just break it? You're going to cover it with weeds. It's really strange. But he's also dressed like he's on a mission. He's got a backpack. Who knows what's in the backpack? Masked, gloved, armed. He's on a mission. It's not random. He's targeted. He's going to that house for a reason. But some of the things, like it tells, there's a lot of speculation out there. This is some sophisticated crew that's doing a kidnapping. Well, if you're sophisticated, you're going to know that there's a camera on the residence if you do any type of surveillance at all.
I think of the mask he's wearing too. Like that has to be one of the worst masks to protect your identity. I mean, the amount of information that people have from the mouth hole where you can see he has facial hair of some kind, his eyes, you get a great look at the eyes and the eyebrows in a way that there are other masks out there that I'm sure would cover it up. It just didn't, like, there was part of it where it was like, why would that be? It's like you Googled what a robber or a kidnapper wears, and that's what you wore. And it just doesn't seem like, in cases, and I know you worked in Chicago, and unfortunately we see videos of violence on the streets of Chicago and home invasions and things like that, where people are covering their faces. You can't make anything out. Like, it just seems like from what he was wearing, it wasn't someone who regularly does this.
I'd agree with that. And like you talked about, there's so much of the eyes were exposed and so much of the mouth was exposed. If you're a professional, I hate to even use that term, you're going to get some eye black, or you're going to get something that wraps, you're going to cover your eyes, you're going to cover your mouth, and then put the mask on so you can't make out those features. I've seen that in even halfway sophisticated crews where you're going to put the eye black inside and around your mouth. And with that mask on, you're not going to be able to tell who it is. What's interesting, and it's a good point that you bring up, is the type of mask, the type of jacket, the backpack. All that is evidence. It's not just the person, it's what they're wearing. That's all evidence.
I think back to a very different case, but like Brian Koberger and the Amazon delivery orders were a big part of what could have been the case against him if he didn't take a plea deal, where you go on Amazon, it's like, well, he bought this in the months leading up to it. I know a lot of people have been looking at the outfit of this person, and even though you don't see a brand logo, you're trying to piece together what was the sweatshirt he was wearing, the backpack, got a really good look at the backpack. How do you go about figuring out who might have bought or acquired a brand specifically? Maybe it was on Amazon. Maybe he went to a REI store and got it. Like how does that actually work?
You got to paper it. You got to write subpoenas and warrants, and your subpoena and records. You're getting grand jury subpoenas. I don't know if they conveyed a grand jury in this case yet, but you're getting subpoenas for all these transactions in this area. And again, it is a massive amount of information to sift through, because how many people are buying masks and backpacks on Amazon? So you got to write. You got to get probable cause, because any evidence you get, you have to back it up with a court order or probable cause to say we can keep this evidence, because you don't want to lose the evidence. So there's a lot of people working on this who are writing a lot of paper.
Well, and if that mask was like not one that was homemade, I can't imagine a lot of people are buying ski masks in Tucson, Arizona. But then again, it could just be, some scissors to a beanie hat or something like that. And you think too of where law enforcement has been for the last couple of days. And on one sense, when you see someone was detained and released, and then from what he's saying, it's like law enforcement was asking his mom, like holding the pictures of the person of interest, those pictures from Nancy Guthrie's front door, asking her if this was her son-in-law. And if it's not him, you wonder, like, is this going back to square one? But then we're seeing activity today where they're continuing to search the area and the roads around Nancy Guthrie's home. When you see the type of activity like we saw last night, is that encouraging that they're headed in the right direction? Or is it something that might say that they're going back and this just maybe wasn't the guy that they thought he was?
Well, it's encouraging in the fact that they're doing more, taking more steps, trying to find more evidence. They're being led to that evidence, guided for some reason or another. It could be, one lead begets another lead. That's encouraging that maybe they're trying to find, they're closer to an offender. It's discouraging to me that Nancy's still alive. It's very discouraging to me that she's still alive. And I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't see it.
I know it's tough. It's tough. You keep thinking about it, and you still hold out hope. I know Savannah Guthrie's holding out hope. One thing too, just about the images that stood out to me was, here's someone who walks up to a doorbell camera, and it doesn't seem like he was anticipating the doorbell camera was going to be there. And it's not like he decided, I got to abort mission and get out of here, I'm going to get in trouble. Like, he just figures out what appeared to be a really sloppy way to try. Like, there was no, like, it was like, okay, I'm just going to go grab these flowers and then hold it up to the camera. And there's like a calmness to him that I found like very chilling when you think about the safety of Nancy Guthrie and who she would be around if this was the person who took her.
Maybe that's his assignment. Maybe his assignment was to watch the front door while whoever did what they were doing made entry in another way. Because I'm not sure how they say there's forced entry, but I'm not sure how the forced entry is made. So maybe his assignment's to stand out front, and he's not going anywhere because that's his assignment while the other stuff is going on inside. Now, I know there's blood on the front porch, so maybe he's trying to cover that up so they can remove her through the front. So maybe that's just his job, was to be lookout in front.
There's I'm sure after the fact, when this story is over, there will be questions about privacy and questions about how does Nest really have your images. But in investigations, I mean, it appears that up until the last couple of days, if not the last day, they didn't realize that these images actually existed. And they had to go into the deep, deep bowels of Nest to get this off of the server. I mean, how often in cases have you seen images that appeared to have not existed at all suddenly be pulled out like this. And I think in a good way, this is an example of now having a key piece of evidence that's pointing law enforcement in the right direction.
It's important to know, unless it's closed circuit TV, that it's always stored somewhere. And at the end of my career, we were using it more and more, where we'd go and we'd recover Nest or Ring cameras right from the home. The FBI, it's good to have the FBI involved because they know how to go deeper, which is what they did in this case. And like I said, if it's recorded and it's not closed circuit TV, it's stored somewhere. It's just, you have to be able to find it.
Yeah. And thankfully in this case, it seems that they were able to get this, because now we kind of have somewhat of a face, a mass face, but a face of who was there when Nancy Guthrie was allegedly taken. And now on day 11, we'll see what happens next. Retired Detective Commander with the Chicago Police Department, Will Svilar. It's always great to have you on Law&Crime. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
All right, once more, if you have information on where Nancy Guthrie may be, contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department, 520-351-4900. And you can also contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or go to tips.fbi.gov. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we are also now streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.